you didn't even expect or anticipate, and they're writing their own script, if you will. So we have had talks about finding ways to add their addendum lines into the script, maybe an Easter egg, maybe some unlockable content. It just depends. We have to basically get the bulk of what we had to get, and then we can try to pepper it where we can. But we keep them for sure, and we're hoping to somehow find a way in the future to drop them in.
That would be amazing.
It'd be really, really fun.
So, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of recording dialogue for a game like World of Warcraft? We've talked about the most rewarding, but
right.
What's sort of the gritty end of it?
I think, it kind of... It's so amazing in every way, but I think, again, what I was kind of alluding to earlier is that you're kind of trying to get these otherworldly creatures, orcs, especially the dungeon bosses. They're monsters of every style. But then you've got scenarios that are otherworldly as well. It's we're operating in the realm of fantasy, right? So it's kind of hard. The challenge can be sometimes getting myself and getting the actor in that headspace to. It was funny, the recording for Cataclysm was so intense that I felt that I was living more in the World of Warcraft, as talking about orcs and dragons and these things as if they're totally real, because you get so immersed in it that it feels more real than my real life at some point. But the challenge is to communicate to the actors and to get them in the headspace whereby they are, even though they are, let's say I keep using a dragon, even though they are a dragon, but to take it seriously, which they do, but to get them in the headspace of you are a dragon being chased or fighting or struggling at this point, and to kind of get everybody involved in the process in that headspace. It's easier, if you're recording human characters and human scenarios, one-to-one human conversations, that's one thing. But when you're in a completely fantasy realm, it's another thing. So I think the challenge is to really make sure that we hit the notes just right, get the energies just right, and really make it a believable scene for all involved.
So what sort of things have you learned from the Cataclysm recording process that you have or will be taking with you into recording for Heart of the Swarm, Diablo 3, and perhaps future World of Warcraft projects?
Right. That's kind of a tougher question, because for me, all of the games are so totally different. I think that what I'm really finding, because right now, so we finished obviously StarCraft, I'm wrapped on Cataclysm, and now I'm already in Diablo territory. I think what's really clear to me as I proceed, what I've learned, is that as I go forward with the casting and directing of this, that each one has its own set of parameters, if you will. I keep saying this, but World of Warcraft was, let's say, much more over the top, if you will. You can kind of have bigger, grander performances because you are operating in a sphere of bigger, grander, crazy things happening, where StarCraft is a very dark, kind of brooding game, and Diablo is much more of a kind of haunting, ethereal game. So I think what I've really learned is especially through Cataclysm, because it really did take over my life for quite some time, is to really realize that each game has its own unique voice. And, I kind of knew this before we started Cataclysm, but it really kind of highlighted to me that it really drove home the world in which World of Warcraft exists and what its needs are. It's almost as if each game, I think for all of us involved, is like its own unique person, its own unique individual with needs and wants and so forth. So it really drove home to me the fact that, it's not just, I'm doing voice casting or voice directing or voice recording. It's not this one general swipe across the board. It's that with each project, it's its own person, and it has to be treated uniquely and individually. I might have my ear attuned to auditions for World of Warcraft for a certain kind of character, but I cannot use that same ear for Diablo because it's a whole different category. So if anything, it really, the Cataclysm and all the StarCraft work I did really drove home that each project is its own unique property. It has to be treated as such. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Do you ever have overlapping projects? And if so, how do you compartmentalize?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. Especially, Diablo was starting to creep in on me while I was doing Cataclysm. And this might sound weird, but I really, I'm a huge music fan. So even actually, this is going to kind of veer off a little bit, but even in New York, whenever I work, like our player characters who really lead the game in a lot of ways, before they would start recording, I would play on huge speakers at full volume some of the music from Wrath of the Lich King soundtrack, because that, especially I think it's called Arthas, My Son, which I think is track 3, which I play in my car because I'm that much of a nerd. But I would play that for them to get them in that headspace, and I would watch them. We'd be kind of chatting and laughing, then I'd put that song on, and then just this transformation would happen. They would just sit differently, and I'm getting chills talking about that now. They would sit differently and take it. You could see it would affect them. So my point is, sometimes I find that with our projects, even listening to the music associated with each project really helps me kind of get in that headspace as well. Because the music itself sets the tone for what we're going to do and what kind of voice we need to have. Like Diablo is very haunting and mysterious, and so we kind of need those performances. So when I need to listen to those auditions, I'll try to get into that kind of Diablo headspace with that music.
So you really change your environment to fit the project.
Absolutely. I myself, if I'm going to lead the charge to find our actors, I really need to make sure that, in order to get other people in that headspace, I have to be in that headspace. So even, listening to auditions, for example, can be quite daunting because we'll get 150 auditions for one role. I've got to make sure that I, in my head, know what I want. Not just, la, 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 I'm going to do some casting. I have to put my head in the Diablo sphere if I'm going to get it right. So,
to sort of wrap things up, you mentioned both Gen Greymane and Gallywix as being these pivotal characters that really embody their roles. They're more constant for players, but are there any particular voices that are sort of secondary that players might only hear when they're leveling through certain zones or running through a specific dungeon that are really awesome or epic in some way?
Yeah, there's so many good ones. And when I was preparing for this interview, I was trying to think of specific ones, but there's, like I said, because Cataclysm is 3 times the amount of dialogue, I can't remember them by name. But what I can tell you is for our dungeon bosses. I know players do dungeons all the time. It's part of the gameplay for World of Warcraft. But I'm telling you, we spend so much time on those dungeon bosses. You might only hear 3 lines, but if you can stop playing for a second and really kind of take in what you're hearing for our dungeon bosses, because not only do we really strive to make the artwork unique and the spells unique and the character itself unique, we really tried to find unique voices for the dungeon bosses. Again, they only have 3 lines, but we've really focused on trying to make them super, super cool and super, super tough. So I think if players can just take a moment out of their busy game playing and try to just hone in and hear what the dungeon boss sounds like and take a moment to appreciate all that's gone into that, I think they'll get rewarded greatly because every dungeon boss is unique and exciting.
Well, I mean, look at Thorum from last time.
Right.
He had shirts and bumper stickers.
Right. There was a couple of dungeon bosses that I even told the actors, and there's so many characters in my head, I can't remember their names, but I remember finishing a session telling an actor, you just wait till this hits. You better get your groove on because you're going to have the action figures and the t-shirts because, all it takes is that one crazy performance. The fans will notice it and love it. And then, boom, that dungeon boss becomes, a big fan favorite, and then the t-shirts start,
Yeah.
So it'll be fun for the actors to revel in that once the game hits. And it'll be fun for our fans to kind of dig in and see what really jumps out at them. So it's really a win-win situation.
I certainly can't wait to update my wardrobe.
I know, it'll be awesome, right? It'll be really good.
Thank you so much, Andrea. This has been such a pleasure.
No, thank you. It's I can talk about this for hours. Thank you.
BlizzCast, your official Blizzard podcast.
For our next segment, we're here with Greg Street, lead systems designer for World of Warcraft and all-around gentleman. Greg, how's it going?
It's awesome.
Perfect. We have a slew of questions for you today, so I'm just going to jump right in. In addition to shaking up Azeroth's landscape, Cataclysm is also introducing a host of class and systems changes. What do you feel has been the most important of these changes, speaking strictly from a character level?
So this won't affect super high-level characters a lot, but the biggest change, we think, is the low-level experience, particularly the magic moment at level 10 now, where you get to be an arms warrior versus just a warrior. You get your special ability, you get passive bonuses that help you really define your character early on. And it's a pretty big deal when you experience it. You get these abilities that you didn't have before. Your playstyle varies quite dramatically at low level. Characters are a lot more powerful than they used to be because of that. And I think it's one of the biggest changes the level up experience has ever had. Right.
I know, I'm excited for that as well. In your opinion, what has been the most difficult or challenging task to take on for this expansion?
Unfortunately, we picked too many different challenging tasks this expansion to change. The talent tree overhaul was huge. I mean, that spent a lot of time, and when we kind of sat down with the class designers who were already through their first attempt at a Cataclysm talent tree. And now we're like, you know what? We're going to throw a lot of that away, and you have to pick like your 10 favorite talents and keep them, and everything else we're going to cut. That was huge. It was a lot of work to do. There were often too many good talents we wanted to keep. We would try to cut something, and then someone would be like, "Oh no, you can't cut that. That's my favorite talent. That's what makes me feel like a Destruction Warlock or whatever." That was really tough. The mechanics overhaul to like the item stats, where we pulled certain stats and combined other stats, wasn't that hard conceptually, except for mastery. We knew we wanted a new stat, and we knew that stat was going to make you better at what you did, but we weren't exactly sure how it was going to work, or how we would explain to players that there were 30 different versions of this stat, or how on earth we would balance that for everyone so that they valued mastery about as much as they should. We were scared it would be awesome for assassination rogues and terrible for subtlety rogues or whatever, and we'll see if that's the case or not.
Perhaps pulling a bit from the previous question, is there anything that you started to work on and thought, we could do this so much better? And is it difficult to change gears once you started on a particular design path?
I can give you two examples, something that worked well and then something that didn't work well. The talent trees worked really well. We were really nervous about it, but as we got into it, it got to be really exciting. I mean, it was easy to look at a talent tree finally and kind of decide how to build your character without necessarily having to go online or trying to realize, hey, is that haste talent, is that good or is that not good compared to this other talent I have to give up to get it? So I think that was something we all rallied behind really quickly and kind of understood how it would work. It was still a lot of work getting it finally done, but we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. On the other hand, something that we had not yet come to a great solution on were the relic slot, or even the ranged slot for a lot of characters. You basically have hunters care a great deal about their ranged weapon. It works fine for them. On the other hand, they don't really care about their main hand weapon. Then you have rogues and warriors who don't care about that weapon a whole lot. It's like some nice stats or whatever. Used to be back in the day, they would use ranged attacks. Nowadays, warriors have heroic throw, and rogues have deadly throw and fan of knives and things like that. So they care a little about the stats of the ranged weapon. It's not nearly as big a deal as it used to be. And then we have wands, which back in the day, you would use your wand to level up, and that was like, the pro thing to do. Never cast a spell, just use your wand instead.
Exactly.
Which we thought was terrible. So we basically don't ask casters to use their wands anymore. So wands are also kind of pointless. And then we had these relics, which were like, okay, everyone gets, according to their spec, they get a relic that when you cast Rejuve, it gives you a bonus, or when you cast Bloodstrike, it gives you a bonus. And I think the grand dream of those is that you would tailor your playstyle to like, oh, I'm a Rejuve casting druid, I'll take that one as opposed to the Lifebloom one. But in reality, you pretty much get one per tier for your guy, so if it's a good one, awesome. If it's a spell you like to cast, you're in good shape. If it's a spell you don't like to cast, it was terrible. So we just got to this point where those relics were pretty much just, hey, have a passive stat buff. It's going to be up on you almost all the time. The relics we ended up with for Cataclysm aren't even class or spec specific anymore. It's just kind of like hey, here's the healer relic. It has a nice gem socket and gives you some stats you want. I think ultimately we're not happy with that whole slot. If we had acted on it a little earlier, perhaps the right call would be just pull it and say that everyone has a weapon slot. For hunters, it's a ranged weapon. For paladins, it's a melee weapon, and just design there. But we struggled with that, and we've struggled with that for years, and I'm not sure we still have a good solution to that. It's just kind of one of those annoying, rough edges we'd like to smooth over for players.
Is it something that you're going to try to improve as Cataclysm goes forward?
I don't know. That's a big change at this point, because we'd have to yank existing items from players. That may be more of a 5.0 level thing. But it's definitely, it's one of those long-term, hey guys, we've eventually got to come up with a better solution here, because the one we have just feels a little weird.
Yeah.
Icky is the word we use a lot. It feels icky.
So in game design, you need to keep track of the past, what's been done, the present, how things are now, and the future, including plans for change. How hard is it to keep track of all those iterations, the things that have changed and the things that still need to change?
Oh, I would say it's almost impossible. Particularly near the end of Cataclysm, when we have one build on PTR, which is not necessarily the same build that's on beta, and then players are